Muammar Mohammed Abu Minyar al-Gaddafi. He is a pretty complicated figure in modern history. Let's get the highlights down, and then we'll talk about this case of revenge and war crimes, propaganda, and crimes against humanity. Gaddafi started out as an Arab nationalist and socialist. Nationalism isn't usually a good sign for anyone in a country who isn't the same as the leader, but we'll see how this plays out. While he was in university, he founded a revolutionary group that would depose the monarchy that existed in Libya in 1969. He then led the country for just a little less than 42 years. Now, during his reign, he did things that really pissed off the West. He ejected them from their military bases and deported all of the Italian population. He was a very vocal antagonist of Western policy. He supported foreign revolutionaries and rebels. He also nationalized the oil industry and built houses, provided healthcare and education projects. He set up congresses that sort of gave a sense of democracy, but we all know he was really in control over most of the decision making. After about 8 years, he became more of a figurehead and backed away from the day-to-day governance, but he remained head of the military and of the committees responsible for policing and the suppression of dissent. Suppression of dissent is the second bad omen for the people of Libya, but let's continue. He probably did have some responsibility in the bombings of 2 commercial flights, Pan Am 103 and UTA 772. He didn't just piss off the West, but it left Gaddafi and therefore Libya pretty isolated. In 1986, the U.S. bombed Libya and the UN would impose sanctions on the country. It didn't bother Gaddafi much. He began promoting Pan-Africanism, promoted the rapprochement of the West, and generally self-promoted with grandiose claims of the improvements he made to life in Libya. It's not that he did nothing. He did. Libya developed significantly after they found massive oil reserves on their land. It's just that his government was wildly corrupt. Too much of the money was spent on the military and whatever Gaddafi wanted. People of Libya experienced more and more unemployment and economic distress, and he was authoritarian in all the wrong ways. He promised to reduce division, get rid of corruption, provide for the people, and promote Arab unity. In reality, he reduced division by getting rid of those who were different. For example, non-Arabic speaking tribes. His idea of Arab unity was more anti-West and anti-Israel than pro-Arab. He was brutal in quashing any sort of dissent. He held intellectual seminars to teach intellectuals how things were going to be and how to fall in line with the revolution. He imprisoned monarchists and journalists. He banned political parties. Big red flag. He did stick it to oil purchasers and managed to get back payments and better pricing from them for the country. On the other hand, he instituted prohibition, shut down churches, and made Arabic the only language to be used in official communications and on road signs. He improved the status of women and improved basic education on the one hand. On the other, he discredited tribal leaders and tried them as counter-revolutionary while removing their land, and built his very own propaganda machine to get people excited about the revolution. In the last few years of his reign, he did try to normalize relationships with the West. The writing was on the wall for many oppressive regimes. The Arab Spring was beginning. He paid $2.7 billion in compensation for Lockerbie victims as a condition of having UN sanctions removed on Libya. But then he tried to force foreign oil purchasers to pay that amount to Libya to cover the amount he paid out. He got the Italian government to apologize for their colonial policies in Libya and improve relationships with the EU. He still talks smack about the West, but he was making inroads. And he was ending the isolation of Libya internationally. At the same time, if a private radio broadcaster dared criticize him, well, they were nationalized. He tried to prevent the Arab Spring from affecting Libya by lowering food prices and purging the army of anyone who might defect and releasing several Islamist prisoners. Libya protested anyway Libyans did, because they were unhappy with the unemployment rate, the suppression of dissent, the systems of patronage. So he did the wrong thing and called those who protest terrorists linked to Al Qaeda and drug addicts. Yeah, well, calling names wasn't going to get Gaddafi out of this. Then he announced that every rebel, every dissident would be hunted down house by house and allowed the army to open fire on them, killing hundreds. Letting loose on the protesters wasn't just an attempt to suppress dissidents. It was an act of cold revenge for a group that dared to challenge Gaddafi's Libya. The protesters, now full-on rebels, took city after city after city, and they had the help of the West. Both sides, and I do mean both sides, Gaddafi and the rebels, committed atrocious crimes against one another. There were arbitrary arrests, torture, executions, revenge attacks. The situation devolved into utter chaos, and NATO bombed Gaddafi into retreat. Everywhere he went, they were there to bomb him. He planned to escape into Africa, but that just wasn't going to happen. The ICC, the International Criminal Court, would issue arrest warrants for Gaddafi and a handful of others for crimes against humanity. And though the rebels, now recognized as the legitimate government of Libya, continued to do the same things, no ICC warrants for them. They were supported by the West, after all. Now, Gaddafi would eventually retreat to his hometown. He left there in a convoy, and some would say he went on a suicide mission. Others would say he was trying to escape. The convoy was bombed by NATO and then surrounded. Gaddafi hid in a drainage pipe while the last of his bodyguards tried to fight off the rebels. He was pulled out of that pipe, apparently sodomized, beaten brutally, and I do mean brutally, by an angry mob, and then he was killed. His body was kept on display for 4 days in a freezer. The man who had taken revenge on so many would feel the wrath and revenge of his own people in the end. Not to express much sympathy for Gaddafi, he reaped what he sowed. But when the West backs its allies, even brand new ones, in committing grotesque crimes against humanity, it kind of proves the point of the rest of the planet has been pointing out for a while. The consequences should be the same, whether you are the goose or whether you are the gander. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying these videos and want more, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any videos. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.